What's up, everybody? I'm Ryan with TrailFX Products. We've teamed up with Jeepers Den in Orlando, Florida to do a couple product installs for the Jeep Wrangler JL edition.
Today we'll be working on a 2018 Jeep Wrangler JL. We are putting in a suspension kit, otherwise probably known better as a budget kit. It's not full springs and brackets, but spacers that'll be going in between the frame and the spring to give you that 2.5 inch lift. First thing, safety. Make sure your rack is secured under the Jeep. You should be able to push and tug on it a little bit and not rock. Make sure it's secured, and here we go. First thing we do is loosen the lower bolt for the shock, loosen the sway bar end link, and any brackets that hold your brake lines. Secure the axle, drop everything, and start installing new parts. We're going to start off by removing the track bar bolt, lower shock bolt. Always easier if you have power tools, but you can always use hand tools. Sway bar end link, brake line bracket, and don't forget your breather hose, your vent tube for your diff. Now we lower the axle down to create enough room to remove the spring. And here you have a coil spring. Want to lower it enough to create more room so we can put our new spacer in and the spring. Okay, here we go. Let's recap on parts. We have some bump stop spacers here, some coil spacers, some flange nuts to attach these coil spacers. We have some spacers here for the shock relocator extension. And then hardware. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is this spacer gets bolted up into the frame pocket with a bolt and a washer, like so. Then this is the factory isolator, which will be cutting this nipple off. This actually fits in a hole up there to clock it. We won't be needing that now. Just snip it off. Lock it in place. Grab your isolator. Make sure you got enough room here and drop in your spring. Make sure to clock this bottom part of the spring on the pad and just repeat for the other side. Once your springs are in, continue with your bump stops. When you compress your suspension, your rubber stop is going to stop here. It's going to avoid for continuing to compress. Following with the shock extension, you have an extension, a spacer, and again, some more hardware. Note, factory bolt's going to be installed on the bottom in its original location, and then the aftermarket bolt's going to be held between the bracket and the shock. Following by the sway bar and your bracket again for your brake line. And repeat for the other side. Yeah, this is the brake line bracket here. Again, reattach. Get all your hardware and brackets in, tighten down to manufacturer specs. Make sure you reattach your vent tube. And now we got to put the track bar bolt back in. Two ways you can do this. You get a buddy, put it on the ground, put your wheels on, get a friend to help you push on the body a little bit and get the bolt in. Or you could use a ratchet strap, find a suitable place to put your hooks in and get it lined up. That concludes the install for the rear. Let's move to the front. Okay guys, well here we are in the front. At this point we will be disconnecting front drive shaft here. Makes it easier when you're lowering the suspension, get more room. Brake line brackets, shocks, and front track bar, similar to what we did on the rear. It's always good, especially on drive shaft, to mark your position. Helps avoid any vibrations. Brake line bracket, remove the bolt on the front track bar. Don't forget your vent tube. Support your front axle. Okay, now that you have the front drive shaft off, your end links, your track bar, and you secured your front axle, you can go ahead with removing the lower bolt for your shock. Little trick for you guys, this shock does have kind of a load, if you want to say, on it. So once you support your front axle, you always want to pull down a little bit, and it's easier to pull the bolt out. We lower off front axle, remove the spring. One thing you want to remember on a JL, you do have this connector here, this small harness. You do want to unplug it and disconnect all the plastic pins that hold it in place. That way it gives you more room to drop as well. Each spring has its position on the Jeep. Don't mix them, don't go left to right, especially on the rear. So when you remove the spring, make sure you're back in its spot. Just like the rear, the front consists of coil spacers, shock extensions, bump stop, and hardware. Remove your factory isolator. Install your spacer and your shock spring isolator right underneath it. JL's already pre-drilled a hole for your bump stop, which is nice. You don't have to worry about that. JK's, you did have to drill it out. Drop your bolt, put your spacer in. Tip, do this after your spring is in. Again, don't forget to clock the spring on the bottom. I have this tricked out little 14 mil wrench. Works great to get up in there. The conventional wrench will work as well. Make sure you're tight. Make sure your spring is clocked. This is the bolt that you're going to be using to attach your bracket on the bottom. On the rear, the hole was big enough for the bolt to go through. Here, you just have to drill it out to about ½ inch. Half-inch drill or a step bit works just fine. And just repeat for the other side. And always coat with a little bit of paint, avoid rust. Drop your new spacer in there, and your isolator right underneath it. Another little tip on the passenger side, remove your brake line bracket. You can gain access better to put your nut underneath of the bump stop. Okay, now that we drilled out the hole on the bottom, we're gonna go ahead and install all the rest of the hardware. Have a short bolt that's gonna come in from the bottom. Then you use your factory bolt through the spacer and your aftermarket bolt attaching the shock to the spacer. Now we raise our axle up again so we get to reach the shock. Remember here, you might have to pull down a little bit on your shock just to get it to line up. And repeat for the other side. Now we tighten down all our hardware to factory specs. Don't forget your brackets, your vent tube. Reattach your harness. Make sure, again, all your hardware is in, tight. Get your drive shaft lined up with the mark made earlier. Reattach your front sway bar end links with the factory hardware. Always double check your hardware, make sure everything is tight, everything looks the way it looked before.
Make sure once your suspension is complete, take it to a proper alignment shop so we can make sure all the adjustments are back in play for proper tire maintenance. If you have any questions about any of our TrailFX products, please visit TrailFX.com.